What is going on, boys? It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 3 prize picks preview for this week's St. Jude Championship. Going to cover what to expect from the golf course here on Saturday, as well as 3 of the top props that I'll be adding to my cards and getting plenty of exposure to. So first things first, let's go ahead and look at the golf course, which today played a lot more difficult than what we saw in round 1, where it played nearly a stroke and a half under par. Today, nearly a stroke more difficult at just under half a stroke under par. You are looking at firmer and faster conditions, and heading into this week, we expected a fiery, firm and fast golf course because they had been in a drought in Memphis for June and July. But this week, early in August, they got drenched in rain, were drenched once again there on Tuesday and Wednesday. And on Thursday, you saw a completely different golf course than what we saw here for Friday. And I would expect that trend to only continue here for Saturday and Sunday because the soil there was so starved, so quenched, needed to be quenched out there in terms of its precipitation. I expect it to dry out a lot faster than most other golf courses. And even though the wind is going to be a little bit lower here for Saturday, I think it's going to play just as difficult, maybe slightly easier than what we saw there on Friday. A lot of that due to the fact that the lower tier out of form players were going to be cut out of the player pool, but nothing better than like 0.7, maybe 0.8 shots under par. I expect par to be a pretty solid score on most holes, and you're going to have the 2 gettable par 5s, but also plenty of landmines out there in the way of water off the tee, or even obviously water protecting these greens. So I don't expect there to be a massive difference either. So the wind is relatively stagnant across the day. It's 5 to 7 miles an hour at the very most. It doesn't really spike at any 1 hour or another, except for 9 a.m. right there where it goes up to 14 mile an hour wind gusts. But I don't think it'll be anything to really worry about. So when we're trying to target players, it's really just free range, right? Take a look at the board. You can evaluate players relatively evenly. It's not something where we're looking to target guys that are, starting off early in the day, which is towards the bottom of the leaderboard, or a circumstance where the guys in the afternoon are supposed to be in better conditions. It's again, relatively even across the board. But what I want to focus on here first, and on the birdie or better board, is going to be a fade. So it's going to be Kevin and Kisner, the first play that we talk about here. And like I mentioned, I expect it to play just as difficult here on Saturday as what we saw today, if not even slightly more difficult. We'll have to see with the firm and fast conditions. But Kevin Kisner absolutely went off. And on Thursday, when it played even easier, was not the best self. Went out there, was a loser both off the tee and on approach. Really wasn't getting by with anything but the putter. Completely luck sacked into 3 shots gained putting there on Thursday. Today gained 2.5 strokes putting, but the ball striking was a little bit more serviceable. So that's why you saw him go out there and shoot the score he did. But that's not sustainable. If you look at his last 2 starts on tour, they were golf courses that really fit his game, and he was somebody I had exposure to in heaps. And in both of those circumstances, went out there and missed the cut. Could not hit a fairway for his life, had a really hard time hitting greens, and I'm taking him on the under on birdie or better, but honestly, I take him under in most things on the board. I think that after today's performance, that he's being a little bit overrated because through the first 2 rounds, he's gained 5 strokes putting, or right around that, which, he does that from time to time. It's Kevin Kisner, but that's not something we can rely on from round to round, particularly at a golf course with all of this water. It's ball striking heavy. It's all about hitting greens, keeping yourself out of trouble, and especially with what we've seen the last 2 starts on tour, I'm not confident that he'll be able to do so. Next, heading over to greens in regulation. Let's go ahead and bring that up here. We're going to be taking the under on Patrick Cantlay. So Patrick Cantlay, another player who's not really a ball striking heavy player. In terms of an elite level guy, right? Like, he's more known for his putting than anything. He's pretty solid off the tee, but his approach play, he's solid. He's not an elite level approach player, but he's priced at the top of the board, 13.5 greens of regulation, among guys like a John Rahm, even higher than a Justin Thomas, Corey Connors, who's an elite of the elite level ball striker, and a solid 1 green over somebody who's won multiple events in a row, Tony Finau, who's also an elite level iron player, Will Zalatoris, Colin Morikawa, who are arguably the best iron players in the world. He's an entire green ahead of them. Why? Because he had 14 greens in round 1 and 13 greens today. First off, round 1, I don't care about, right? He hit 14 on the easiest conditions and extremely receptive conditions there on Thursday. Here for Saturday, they're going to be just like today where he hit 13, and he luck sacked into that. His driving accuracy was off the roof. He was hitting out of the short grass more than most players. And for Patrick Cantlay, we know that's not sustainable. He can get a little bit wiry from time to time. And even with the solid performance, he went under today, where he hit 13 greens of regulation. If they're going to get even firmer and faster throughout the weekend, even with lower winds, I don't see him improving on that performance. So it's one of my favorite props on the board, especially here from the fade side. I'm taking the under on Patrick Cantlay greens of regulation. And the last prop that I'm taking is the under on Joohyung Kim's strokes. They're at 68, and he's a player who today struggled, right? He shot even par, so I put struggled there in quotes. It really wasn't all that bad when you compare it to the tour average, but it was a complete result of his putting, which last week he gained 12 strokes to the field. It's a strength of his. We've seen that over the last few months. It's why he's been at the top of the leaderboard there for week to week. And just today, even there on Thursday, it wasn't his best self. He's still been pretty solid from tee to green, a great approach player, extremely accurate off the tee, puts himself in all of the positions that you'd be looking for, but just couldn't cash in enough. And I expect that to turn around. We've seen him be that consistent gainer on the greens. He's had plenty of success on the Bermuda grass surface. So I'm willing to look past a few bad rounds, particularly when he's at 68 strokes. I mean, he's priced among guys that he's just clearly better than. I mean, particularly like a Siwoo Kim. I think that's a glaring difference. Sahith Theegala even, especially a Christian Bezuidenhout, and just head and shoulders better than somebody like a JT Poston, guys like a Cameron Davis, for example. So I think he's just, head and shoulders better than the guys priced around him. He's primed for a bounce back performance because he was able to go out there and, gain in all the ball striking categories. It just needs to turn it around with the putter, which has been all that hot. And something we can take as a supportive stance, right? Because if we're going to do this 3-leg card, do a 3-leg power there at pays 5x. If this were an over instead, you can see it only pays 4x. So you get a little bit of a negative multiplier. Whereas if you mix in the one supportive stance, we end up getting our normal payout. So that's what's important there for the 3-leg if you're going to go ahead and tail these picks. But as per usual, all of my picks are on my Patreon page. There will be a link down in the description of this video to go ahead and join that, but it is $10 a month. I have over 20 picks on there for tomorrow. So if you're looking for everything I have to offer, that's where you can find that. But just some general board thoughts. I think some of the strokes numbers, particularly for the elite tier guys, are a little bit lower than they should be. So I wouldn't be taking the unders, but overs would also be a little bit dicey. And I think there's a lot of push equity there at 67. So I'm probably just fading their strokes outside of a few guys that I'm taking. For birdie or better, I think it's also a little bit inflated. So for a lot of the top end guys, I'm just fading them in general. There are a few unders that I'm taking on a select few of guys that just aren't playing all that solid golf. We talked about Kevin Kisner, for example, but there are a few guys at the bottom of the board that I am taking overs on. I mean, Joohyung Kim is one of them at 4.5, for example. So there are guys that I have supportive stances for here. I mean, obviously I have them on strokes, but it's just a way to differentiate it over there with birdie or better. Birdie or better matchup, there are a few on the board that I like. Mostly just looking for a differential. First off, on approach play for the first two rounds, I'm looking for the better approach player, but also the higher birdie or better percentage player. So if they're better in shots gained approach through the first two rounds and they have a higher birdie percentage for the year on tour, so not just for this event, for the year, they're going to be a player that I'm actively looking to get to. So that's how I'm taking birdie or better percentage. Green regulation, I also think they're really high. Like I said, with fading Patrick Cantlay, it's not just that. Even the guys at like 12.5, there's a few of them that I'd be looking to fade. And then over there with fairways hit, you also have a lot of high numbers. I think the board in general is priced a little bit higher than it should be. So tread carefully, right? Be careful where you're taking your overs, because I think you could be walking into a few trap spots with how I expect it to get firmer and faster. But that's all I've got here for round 3. Hopefully you guys feel a little bit more prepared to make your own lineups. I'm going to go ahead and cut it off, but we'll try and do a video here for round 4. But these prize picks videos, it's all dependent on what I'm doing with my schedule and whatnot. But make sure to go ahead and follow me on Twitter. Obviously, subscribe to the channel so when I post these, you get a notification or able to watch them when I go live. But most importantly, like I mentioned a little bit ago, if you want access to all of my plays, no matter what, for every slate, I'll be posting 20 to 30 picks on my Patreon. Make sure to go ahead and join down below. I also cover all of my DFS stuff there. There's a Discord community to go ahead and
interact with me, ask me any questions. Also interact with the rest of the community, now 200 members strong, actually over 200 members strong. And also, so you can go ahead and get my DFS projections, right? So not just for prize picks, I cover a lot of stuff for Draftkings too when it comes to the golf side. So a lot of value there and a lot that you can get out of it. So that's all I've got for you guys. Best of luck with all of your slips here for the next round, and let's get this cash.